All right, so welcome to session 2. And so let's just start with a bit of a refresher um, on what we were doing last time. So last time we went over the rules of chess and also went over some basic opening principles. So the opening is the first stage of the game. And so this is a starting board. Remember, we said 8x8 chess. This is what the chessboard starts out as. White goes first. And remember, we can go 2 squares with our pawns, and we want to control these 4 squares. Right? So what that looks like is we just bring out all our pieces towards these 4 squares. So for example, something like this. Just an example. To say this. And eventually we get to this position where our rooks are connected. So what that means is that they're looking at each other. We brought out all our pieces, and we've castled, so our king is safe. And now we move into sort of the maneuvering stage. But this is the kind of the opening. This is like the ideal setup. Of course, if they let us, if they like do some random moves, we don't have to come here. We could take all the space in the center. Right? If they do a bunch of random moves, we can just bring out our pieces like this. Right? So now we have a lot of control over these 4 center squares. Right? But those are the basic principles. But these principles don't mean much if we don't know how to checkmate, right? So what does checkmate mean? Is that we win the game, is that the king, the opponent, well, not necessarily the opponent, the king is attacked and it has no squares to run away to. So, for example, let's say this is a very famous one. Let's say this one. Let's say I bring out my queen. This is not good opening principles, but let's say I bring out my queen here. I attack this pawn, so you protect. Attack this pawn, so you protect. I bring out my bishop, and this is what's called the scholar's mate. So it's a 4-move checkmate. So we don't, as white, we don't like to do this because our queen is out and can be attacked very easily. So g6 here is a perfectly reasonable move. It attacks the queen, and now we have to kind of come back. And we just wasted a lot of moves moving our queen out. So it's not good, but a lot of people here are going to play knight f6, right? Because it looks normal where we're controlling the center and we're attacking the queen. But here, there is a mate in 1. So what does that means? We can checkmate and win the game in 1 move. So anyone know what this one is? Anyone see this? So you can type in the chat. If you remember the notation is you say the piece name. So like, let's say knight, and then where it's going, the file, let's say, so C, and then C3. So this is just an example. This wouldn't be mate, but knight C3, this is what we call, remember. But anyone see this one? So you can type in the chat, or if you want, you can come on mic. Bishop to f7. Wow, very, very good try. So bishop f7. So this is check, right? So that's the first thing, right? When we give checkmate, so what's the first condition is we have to attack the king, right? So we've attacked the king here. So this is accomplishes that first step. The second step, though, is we have to make sure the king cannot run anywhere. So if we take this with our bishop, let's see, can the king run anywhere? Think. Yeah. So the king can run up here to e7, right? But here we can take with the queen. And this is one of the most, the quickest way to ways to checkmate. This is the 4-move checkmate, otherwise known as the scholar's mate. There's a faster one as white. So let's say you go g4, e5, let's say, then you play f3. So this is a 2-move checkmate. otherwise known as the fool's mate. So basically white has to cooperate here to open the king up and get himself checkmated, but it is possible to get, this is the fastest way to get checkmated. And this is also a good illustration of why you don't want to push this f pawn here, right? We don't want to push this f pawn. So g4, first of all, isn't a very good move, but if at least we don't play f3, we don't get checkmated, right? Because our king is safe here. So as white, we don't want to move really our pawn, this f3 pawn, because it opens up our king here. And as black, we don't really want to move this pawn because it opens up our king here, right? And even when we castle, if we move our f pawn, our king might get attacked on this diagonal instead. But that's a bit more advanced. So those are just two very quick checkmates. So as extension, let's go through some basic checkmates. Because if we do really well in the game, we win a bunch of pieces, and then we end up with, let's say, a queen and rook here, it'll be very sad if we won't be able to checkmate because we did all that hard work, right? So here, I'm gonna, this is not even, the things in chess called tactics. So like if you do the sequence of moves, you win the game. But this is sort of not, it's not even a tactic. It's more like a pattern that if you end up in this position with a queen and rook against nothing, that's a win as long as you know the pattern, right? 100% of the time, even if you're playing against Magnus Carlsen, the best chess player in the world, or a computer, you will be able to win this 100% of the time if you know the pattern. So this is called the ladder checkmate. So how the ladder checkmate works is basically we have to pick a side. So we don't necessarily have to pick, but we should have an idea of where the king is going, and we can kind of change our decision based on where the king runs to. But we want the king to end up on one of these sides on the edge of the board, right? Because if you notice the edge of the board, that's where you have the least squares to move to. So we want to push the king to the edge of the board so that it can't run away. So how we do that is, okay, we look at this king. Which side is it closest to? So if I wanted to get this king all the way over here to this side, that's pretty far, right? So let's probably not do that. This side is closer, right? Only a couple of squares, but I think this one is the closest, right? So that's the side that I'm thinking right now. I'm going to push the king to. So I'm going to move my queen here. And the reason for that is that I don't want the king to be running away from the side that I just decided. I just said, oh, I wanted to get him over here. So I'm like, okay, the first step is I'm going to make sure that you can't run to the side I don't want you to go, right? So what this does is called cutting the king off, right? We stop the king from running out. Okay, so now he can't go up. So it has to either go back where I want him to go or stay on the same, this is called the same ring, right? So it stays on the same ring. And so now I can bring my rook down here. And so what this does is I cut off, my queen is still here cutting him off. And so I have to use the other piece, my other piece that's not doing anything yet, to attack the king over here. And so now it runs back. So you see we're making progress, right? It's coming back. Yeah, rook h6, very good. And then his king comes back. And now it's a bit harder to say what to do because the next move is that we want to get a queen here to cut this one off because our rook is here. So as an illustration here, if we just follow our rook, hit the king with the rook, he just comes back. We check him again, he comes back and forth, right? So we can't use the rook. So that's why I like to say the rook has a job, right? So right now the rook is doing the job of cutting the king off right here. So our queen is not doing the job, right? It is covering the king, but that's not the main point because the rook is already doing it. So here I'm just gonna move my queen to the other side because if I come here or here, the king's gonna take me. So I'm just gonna run to the other side because remember the king is super slow, so it won't be able to come over here and attack me. So I just come here, right? Block both of these. And does anyone see the mate in one? Rook to h8, very good. Rook to h8, that's mate. So that's how you do the queen and rook mate. And so if that's the first time you see that, it may be a bit unclear what's going on. So let's make it a bit easier here. And this isn't going to be the fastest way, but just to illustrate what the idea of the ladder mate is. So let's say I've moved my rook here, and I'm just going to move my king out of the way because it's going to get in the way of this whole attacking idea. Is that now my queen and rook are perfectly set up what I call the ladder mate. So it's what I just showed you before. That's also the ladder mate, but this is kind of, I'm going to show you right now is sort of the classic way of doing it. And this way, you almost don't have to think. It's basically, is the rook, have the rook closer to the king than the queen, because otherwise it's going to take the queen. I'll show you that later. But here, what I'm going to do is like a ladder, like you're going up a ladder, you just move one piece here. It doesn't even matter, it's not check, right? We almost don't even care where the king is because it's eventually going to end up here and get checkmated. So I'm just going to move my rook up now. So just alternating, going back and forth. So it's like putting one arm up, then putting the other arm up, right? So we're moving a right arm up. So that's the rook. And then we move our queen up. That's the queen. That's the left arm. Then right arm up. So just going back and forth. And you see, this is the ladder mate. So we keep cutting off the king one row at a time, and then he's checkmate, right? So that's the idea of the ladder mate. And so let me show you what happens if I do the other way where the queen is closer than the rook. Is that, so I do the same thing, is that now if I try to come here, he takes me, right? Yeah, exactly, right? He takes the queen. So this is why we want to have the rook out closer to the king rather than the queen, because if the rook is, if we switch it, so let's say we just switch it like this, you see now I can't take the rook. I can never take this rook because my queen will always be protecting me, right? So this is the ladder mate, and this one comes up a ton. Not always even with no pieces on the board. It comes up in a bunch of different cases. So this one's super good to know. And it also is the same idea as the two rook mate. It's the same thing as the ladder mate. The only difference is because it's not a queen, they cannot protect each other. So we have to be a little bit, we have to think a little bit more, is that we have to use the fact that the king is super slow. So the king is super slow. So we do the same idea. So we cut off the king, right? So we decide, okay, which side is the king closest to? Which edge is the king closest to? That's going to be this side. So I'm going to cut him off so he can't run away from that side. I'm going to say no running away from that side. Okay, so now I check him with my other rook. So this is the same thing as the queen and rook, as what we did first. But you see, again, we cannot move our rook here because he takes us. So the whole idea is kind of what I already showed before, is that we move all the way to the other side of the board to give checkmate like this. So now it's the exact same thing, the ladder, right? The only difference is that we have to just be careful not to hang our rook. So let's say we do this. This isn't the fastest way, but let's say we were doing the ladder and he attacks us, right? So this is going to be a super common thing. So now we can't just follow the ladder because he's going to take us. Oops. Yeah, but he's going to take us, right? So here, this is the idea, is that we just move our rook to the other side of the board, and then the other rook to the, again, right? So this is the same thing. If I go here, he takes us. So other side of the board, and you see the king, he can't teleport all the way over here to attack our rooks, right? So now we use the fact that the rook can move long distances to give this ladder mate. All right. Any questions so far? So if you know those two checkmates, you're really golden, because they come up a lot, and pretty much if you are playing at towards the beginner levels, you will probably if you win, you'll be up a lot of material, and so that will come up a lot. So if you have two rooks, or rook and queen, so knowing those checkmates are super important. All right, so looks like no questions. So moving on. So the last one that I think we'll probably do today, the rook checkmate, is another one. So the rook checkmate is also a pattern that you can remember and win, but that's a bit harder, so we may not get to that today. But finally is the queen checkmate. So even with just one queen, without the rook, we can still checkmate. And there are many ways of doing this, but basically you have to remember is that one piece, even the queen, which is the most powerful piece, even the queen cannot checkmate by itself, right? So we have to use, in this case, our king, right? But if we use our queen and king, unless you got the pattern down really well, it's kind of hard, right? So there are a lot of ways to do it, and using the king and queen kind of together is the fastest. But I think the most simple is to remember the rule of basically the knight's distance. Basically, we want the queen to be a knight's distance away. So what does that mean? So like kind of an L, right? Remember how the knight moves? It moves like an L. We want it to be knight's distance away from the king. So right now we can't move to a knight's distance away. So I'm just gonna cut him off like this. And now he moved a knight's distance away to my queen. But the thing is, we want it to be their move in this position. So I'm just gonna waste a move. It's not really wasting a move because we want our king to be close in front of this king anyway. So let's move our king closer. And now I'm just gonna go knight's distance, right? And just follow the king knight's distance away. Right? So we're almost kind of giving him invisible, indirect checks. Even though the queen cannot move like a knight, the whole idea is that you see this king, it's blocked in these ways. So we can kind of push the king, keep pushing it away. Even with the soul queen, we can push it to this side that we want. The only thing is we can keep pushing it, but we'll never be able to checkmate with just the queen. That's where we have to bring the king in. So here again, I can continue pushing it. So it's already a knight's distance, but I can keep pushing it like this way, right? So push it more. And then see, I've got it to the corner of the board just using my queen. Only using my queen, I got to the corner of the board. And so when the second that the king touches the edge of the board, we cut him off on sort of the parallel line. Right? So we cut him off kind of like the ladder mate, that we cut him off like this. And the thing to be careful here is we don't want to be knight's distance when the black king is in the corner, because if we do that, this is called stalemate. So stalemate is sort of maybe a bit controversial, maybe the most controversial rule of chess, is that when, let's see, what is stalemate? Yeah, the king can't move, right? But it's not in check, right? So if the king can't move and it's in check, that's checkmate. But if the king can't move and it's not in check, that's called stalemate. And stalemate is a half point. So if we win, we get a full point, 1 point. And if we do a stalemate, it's called a draw, and we get half points each, right? So we're up 9 points of material, right? So if you remember the values of each piece, is that we don't want to have a draw with 9 points of material up. And this is a draw because the king cannot move. And that's called stalemate. So we want to avoid this. So in this case, the second the king touches the edge, any of these squares that I highlighted here, right? Yeah, so keep doing that. Any of these arrows, any of the squares that touch these arrows, is that we now can, first of all, we cut off the king, and now we can just bring our king in, and then move our queen in front of the king, and that's checkmate. So that's how we give checkmate with the queen. And now there are a few other things to mention. So I'm gonna just do this. Sorry, that was a mouse slip. Let's just push the king over like this. So let's say it's like this. This is the other thing. This is sort of why I say it's a bit more, it's a bit easier to just focus on just the queen first and then bring in your king, is that if you kind of go back and forth, this is another mistake that can happen, is if we immediately don't cut off the king and then bring our king into checkmate, our queen into checkmate, what can happen is that, so unfortunately I have to restart here. What can happen is that we can give stalemate. So here we really should, well, actually when it touches this corner, we could have blocked him off here. But let's say we just do the knight's move, knight's distance, is that here we really should cut off the king and bring on our king later, right? Just to be careful. But if we bring in our king immediately without cutting off the king, we might accidentally bring our king in here. And this is called, also, remember what this is called? So can the king move? So it can't touch any of these arrows, right? So you can't move, right? Yeah, so queen, if it was our turn, we would want to go queen g7. That would be checkmate. But it's black's move, right? So yeah, we could go queen g7 if it was our move. But since it's black's move, black cannot go anywhere. And that's stalemate. So this is why we want to be careful here. Is that the second the king comes back into the corner, we block him off and then move here. And as you said, queen g7 here is checkmate. And it's checkmate because we cover all the squares, right? And also our king protects, right? So remembering this queen in front of the king, that's checkmate. All right, great. So now we know, of course I went over it pretty quickly, but now we know basically all the basic checkmates. The rook and king checkmate is something we can probably go over later because it's a bit hard. So let's now practice. So now we know like the piece checkmates. So the queen in rook, two rook, and also just the queen, right? So if we get to the end game, so there's an opening, so that's kind of the beginning, and then there's a middle game, so as it sounds, the middle of the game, and then the end game. So if we reach the end of the game, where we have very few pieces, but we have a queen and rook, or two rooks, or just the queen, now we know how to checkmate, right? But also there can be checkmates in other stages of the game. And here, let's try to practice that. So, no, so practice. Okay. So here we can do some basic checkmates. And so I think these are checkmate in ones. And this is called the back rank mate. So this is a common one. So it's a white to move. Does anyone see the checkmate? So remember, checkmate has to be check. Yes, rook to e8, right? So this is called the back rank mate because we move our rook to the back rank, and it's mate because these three pieces, the pawns, are in the way. So actually, remember what we did? We were using for like a ladder checkmate. We blocked these squares with our, let's say, a rook or queen to give checkmate. Well, here it's actually black's own pieces that are blocking his escape path, and then we can give checkmate. So that's a super common one. Okay. So what about this one? So this is what they call the hook mate. So here, our pawn guards our knight here. King can't come out here. So how do we use this to our advantage? So this one's a bit harder. Anyone see? How do we give checkmate in this position? Knight to d5, very good try. So knight to d5, check, right? So of course, every single checkmate has to be at least a check. So knight to d5, let's see. So knight to d5, he can't go back here. He still can't go here. Can't go here. He can't go here. Can't go here. So he can't go to any of those squares I highlighted. But I think he can come up here and then he can go to the side. Right? Because our knight is moving away from protecting this. So let's see, right? Yeah. So he can come up. Right? So knight d5 is a good attempt. You know, we have some other checks with our knight. This one, but he also comes up. So Rook e8, yes, Rook e8. So the same idea, the same not idea, the same move as the last one. Rook e8 is checkmate because the knight covers here, right? As we mentioned. So let's just highlight all the squares he can't go to. Can't go here. Can't go here, here, here because of the rook. And also can't go here. So it can't go any squares, and this is what they call the hook checkmate. So that's another checkmate. So what about this one? Maybe let's try. I think they have. All right, fine. Let's start with this one. What about this one? So this one's a bit easier because there's actually only one check in the position. So we just have to see which one give check. And so these ones are blocked here, can't come out. Yeah, rook to h5. It's the only check, and it's kind of like a back rank check, but it's on the side using our knight. Okay. So now we can give checkmate, and they have it a bit interesting here. And I would say this is a bit cooler. You could have also done this with the back rank mate that they had. So basically, you could have taken so there's a longer sequence to get the same idea. Is that we could take the rook here, sack. This is called sacking. So like sacrificing the queen, and then checkmating. Oops, that wasn't checkmate. That was losing the rook. Taking the rook, and that's checkmate, right? So this is a back rank mate, and they have different variations of it. But I think this one's a bit cooler. So here, remember last time we were in this position and we give checkmate here. But can we get to that same position from this one? So it's very similar position, right? So can we get to the same position? So remember the king was like here. The king was like here, and we didn't have a queen. I think that's the only difference, right? So how do we do that? Right? So you look at the difference here. So if you guys can get this one, then I would say this is like one of the most basic ones, coolest ones out of like the basic checkmate patterns. So rook c8. So this is kind of similar to like the backmate ideas, right? So but rook c8, then rook f8. Yeah. So this is, you're trying to do like the backwing pattern, but here if we go rook f8, they can take us, right? And unfortunately, then we don't have the backwing mate. So good thought process there, similar to the backwing mate, but here we want to try to emulate. We want to try to sort of follow this checkmate pattern, this one, right? So the checkmate here, right? So here, from this position, how do we get to this position? So if we can get to this position, we already know, we just come here and checkmate. So from this position, can we get to that position where the king is here? And then we come here. Can we get there? Queen h7. Very good. So I'm not sure if you're saying rook h5 first or queen h7 first. I think rook h7, rook h5 first. The issue is that they can take our queen, but queen h7 immediately. So it looks like impossible, right? Because we're just like losing a queen. But remember, this is the same position as this now. It's the same position. And if you remember, that's checkmate in one. So that's, even if we lose the queen, if we checkmate, that's all that matters, right? Okay, so this one now, this one is a bit of a longer one, but it's the same continuation. So yeah, so queen h7 here, then he can take though. And then we don't have the rook h7. It's c7. Right, so that opens up the rook to h5. Very good. But unfortunately, let's try that. We go here. Then if we come here, then we don't have this, right? So we come here, then it can come out, right? So we have to be a bit more forcing. So this is maybe why I should introduce some of the principles of tactics, is that we want to look for forcing moves. So that's checks, captures, and threats in that order. So here, okay, I think you're getting it. Knight c7 first. Close, right? But knight c7, remember, even if we get on knight c7 and we take check, we want our knight to e7, right? e7. So actually, do you see the idea now? So we can actually go. So how does this work? We can actually go knight e7, check, right? That's check. And this is the same position as this one. So now we're getting kind of complicated, right? So we give a check. And so now these are like tactics, right? These are what I was mentioning before. These are long tactics, right? But again, remember everything, then it's just the same. It's just about getting to the same position as we saw before, right? So here we ended up in the final position. We give checkmate. Here we have to sack a queen, sacrifice a queen, and then we can give checkmate because we've already seen that last position. And here we give check first, and then we can sack a queen. And it's the same position, right? So it's all the same thing. Okay. Let's see. All right, so let's start. Let's try to do some puzzles here. Dashboard, theme, and let's try these with this main inputs. So these are the checkmate in ones, right? So remember we have to give check to make checkmate in one. So anyone, even if it's not checkmate, just throw out checks. If you find checkmate immediately, then that's also great. But even if it's just the check, that's where we have to start looking. We have to start looking at the checks, and then we see, oh, is that checkmate or not? And then we decide. So let's see here. Yeah, very good. Bishop D1. That's immediately, well, I hate to give it away so early, but yes, that's checkmate in one. Because, well, let's I like to call these like lasers, let's draw these lasers where the king cannot move. So it's kind of like a Bond movie or something, where you can't touch the laser, or like a heist movie where you can't touch these lasers, and he's blocked on this side. So he can't go any of these squares, and he's also in check because he's kind of skewered by the laser. Can't block it, can't take the bishop, can't do anything, right? So that's checkmate in one. Very good. So what about this one? So remember, checkmate has to be check, at least. So just throw out checks as some candidate moves, and then we'll see, is that checkmate or not? So don't be afraid if you don't get the checkmate, because that's just the process of calculation, right? Anyone has to go through the check to see if it's checkmate or not, right? Queen H1, yeah, very good. Queen H1. So that's a long move, right? So like Queen B5 is a check, but it's not checkmate, right? Because you can clearly just run away from it. Queen H6 is the same idea, can clearly run away, also can take you. But Queen H1, that's checkmate, because, well, this is kind of similar to the back rank checkmate, is that, well, first of all, it's on the back rank, and we're sort of blocking these three squares in different ways, right? So this time it's the knight and the queen, and of course, white's own pawn is in the way of his escape. So that's checkmate. So if we draw these lasers again, yeah, that's everything. All right. So here we have, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 checks. So let's see if we can get the correct one. but if not, that's also part of the process. So 6 checks. So wow, Rook F8. Wow, you're getting these super nicely. Rook F8, very good. So here's sort of another principle of attacking chess is that remember when I talked about the ladder checkmates, is that like I was saying, oh, they have a job, right? And so the similar idea is that we want to bring more pieces into the party because this queen already has a job, right? It's already like kind of holding down the king, right? So if we come here, you can come out. So that's why we bring our rook instead, because our rook wasn't doing as much, right? So we bring our rook instead. So when we're attacking, we want to just bring in all the pieces that we can. So if we have an option to check with a piece that's already kind of in the attack versus a check from a piece that's not doing much yet, we usually want to bring piece that hasn't been doing much, and that will just get a ton of pieces into the action. In this case, that's checkmate 1. So just drawing the lasers again. That's all the squares the king can go to. So I think we're seeing how checkmates look, right? So this is how a checkmate looks. Okay. So this one is a hard one. Hard one now. So let's see how many checks we have. 1, 2, 3, 4. Only 4 checks, but this one's probably the hardest one so far. Wow. You're just getting these so easily. Rook H8, yes. And why is that? That's checkmate. But it's like, why? Can't he take? And so this is what we call a pin, right? So the pin is when a piece cannot move because a more important piece will be attacked. And in this case, it's the most important piece is the king, right? So that's literally illegal to take the rook. So now we just draw the lasers again. Oh, we don't need to draw that one technically, but that's the reason why he can't be taken. And he's just blocked everywhere else. And that's checkmate, right? Of course, this one's also protected. The rook is protected by the other rook here. All right. So here is one of the cases where we have many different ways to solve this problem, but also several ways to make some mistakes here. So it's not quite easy. We have a lot of checks. And all of them involve one piece. And this is what we call a discovered check. So can anyone tell me either checkmate, check, or even which piece you think we're going to have to move to give check or checkmate to the king? Okay. So here's one choice to go rook g1. So this is a really good idea, rook to g1, right? So this is discover check, right? So this discover check is when let's say we move this rook somewhere and the king is then open to attacks, right? That's discover check. So we move a piece out of the way so then our other pieces can attack, right? So this piece itself isn't attacking, but rook g1 is sort of a special type of discovered attack, and that's called double check. So usually when we attack, we only attack with one piece, but here we go rook g1, we attack with the rook and with the bishop, right? So we attack two pieces. However, if we go rook to g1, the only problem here, so he cannot take with the bishop, he cannot take the rook, because two pieces are attacking him. So even if he just gets rid of one, he cannot escape. The problem is that unfortunately he has king takes g1, which gets rid of one attacker and dodges the other one, right? So then that's not mate in one, but it's very close. And yeah, as the one person says, the rook is the piece that we must move to give check. So rook g1 is a super close one, but not quite it. So this is our first introduction to discovered checks. Rook to g3, very good. Yes. And so actually, if we go to any of these squares, that's checkmate. Any of these squares is checkmate. So rook g3 is fine, or even rook, rook back here, because the point is that we cover this square and we give check with this bishop, right? So rook g1 almost works, but not quite, because of king takes g1, which is a hard move to spot, because you think, oh, must be better, right? But in this case, it's an exception. So here, any move, any discovered check. So remember, discovered check is when we move a piece out of the way to uncover the hidden like artillery behind it. So we have some major attacking power behind this rook. So that's why I want to just move it out of the way. All right, very good. Okay. Oh. Okay, this one is actually hard. It took me like some time to figure this one out. But it's the same idea as the other one. So I'll give you that hint. It is the same idea. It's discovery. Discovery, remember, is we move a piece out of the way to unravel the hidden artillery or power, the hidden attacking power behind it, right? So here there are a lot of pieces looking at this black king here, right? We have a rook, we have a queen, we have a bishop, maybe even a knight can come in somehow. So it's a bit harder to determine, to see what's the piece here. So maybe we should start there. What piece do we have to move here? What piece is going to, if we move, will it open up some other piece to attack the king? Not directly attacking. That's why it's called discovered check. In this case, discovered checkmate. Which piece is that? And if you want, you can tell me a move as well. Yes. So correct. Bishop e8 is the fanciest way, I would say, of doing this. Is that we move. So the way of thinking about it is, if we move this bishop, let's say we have a power, we don't have this power. If we get rid of this bishop, make it disappear, that's check. So that's the idea of the discover check, is that we're just moving it out of the way. So if instead of moving pieces, if we could make a piece disappear, and then that would give us an attack, which piece is that? And that's the bishop, right? So for example, we could move our rook to f7, right? So that's a check, right? So that's kind of a classic check, and it looks, well, I'm pretty sure that's checkmate. If the king comes back and then rook bishop takes h5, right? So that's gonna be checkmate anyway. But so one person is saying rook f8. Rook f8 blocks, right? So it blocks kind of the escape squares, right? But you have to remember is that checkmate has to be check, right? So we always have to attack the king at least to give check. You know, rook f8 could be like if it was like a mate in 2, like checkmate in 2 or more moves. Rook f8 could have been the move. But if we're trying to give checkmate in 1, it has to be check, right? And rook f8, you know, is a good idea to like kind of cut the escape paths from the king. But if we go rook f8, you can unfortunately take it in a number of ways. And then we won't be able to checkmate then. So yeah, so bishop e8 or bishop takes h5, both of them win because of this check, discovered checkmate on the king. Yeah, so personally, I like bishop e8 more. Bishop takes h5 has some arguments for it as well. It's a matter of personal taste, I guess. But I like moving the bishop to the last rank and just like somehow that's checkmate. Not even, it's like, what is that bishop doing there? That's kind of a cool one. Bishop takes h5 is of course checkmate as well. And actually, if we move our bishop back here, that's also checkmate. The only thing that what wouldn't be checkmate with the bishop is taking here, which leads to checkmate, but it's not mate in 1. And also bishop here, right? Because it blocks the rook. All right, so maybe this one will be the last one. 1 or 2 more. How do we do this one? So remember, checkmate, we're checkmating in 1 move, so it has to at least be check. If it was longer, then it gets more complicated. All right, let's see. So I see knight to d6, rook to d2. So it's white to move, rook to d2, and also knight to c7, right? So let's start with rook to d2, right? So we're kind of bringing, I guess this is kind of what I was talking about earlier. It's like bringing more pieces into the fight, right? But rook to d2, unfortunately, it doesn't attack the king directly, right? So it attacks the rook, but it doesn't attack the king, right? So that's not check. So, you know, it could be a good move, but it's not going to be checkmate. Right? And also rook to d2, I think he can take us, unfortunately. And knight to c7 doesn't give check either. It does, it's like a similar thing, right? Bringing more pieces into the battle, right? But again, it has to be check. So if we just look at where it can go, it's not hitting the king, right? So it's the knight is kind of a weird piece, is that we can move closer to the king, but actually it's not closer to a checking it, right? So the knight is kind of an awkward piece in that sense. Basically any other piece, if we go closer, we are closer to checking it, but actually in this case we're moving farther from checking it, because in this case knight d6 is a check, right? So knight d6, we can move in one move to check the king. The only issue with this is that the king cannot move. So if we do the laser thing, the king is lasered here, and then the rook covers everything here, right? So that seems like checkmate. The only issue is that he can take us with the queen or rook. Probably the rook, because if he takes with the queen, then we take with our pawn and we win a queen, right? And remember, if you remember the values of the pieces, the queen is worth 9 pieces, 9 points, and then the knight is worth 3 points. And then pawn is worth 1. So 4 versus 9 doesn't seem very good. So that's why he's probably going to take with the rook, which is worth 5 points. And then if he only loses 5 points, then he gains 4 maybe. So not too bad. So knight d6 is a good try as well, but still doesn't work. This one's a hard one. Any other attempts? So remember, it has to be check. So it has to attack the king. Very good. Rook to b8. That's a nice try. Rook to b8, right? Kind of similar to like the back rank mates that we talked about. So rook b8. Let's see. Rook b8. He cannot come up. He cannot come here. He cannot obviously go here. Unfortunately, I think he can take our rook with his king or with the bishop. And also he could probably run away to d7. Right? So rook to c7 is another nice try, right? It's a fork, right? But unfortunately, remember the queen can move like the rook. So if the rook is attacking the queen is definitely attacking the rook. So it can take us, is what I'm trying to say there. So knight a7 though. Knight a7, believe that is, let's see. Can the knight be blocked? No, the knight can never be blocked because it can jump over things. So knight is the only piece that can never be blocked. I guess you could say the pawn as well, but that's because it can only attack one square, so there's nothing that can go between the pieces. But the knight is the only piece that can not be blocked because it can jump over things. Right? So it cannot be blocked. And if we do the lasers, it's blocked in all these squares. So that leaves one option. Can he take us? Is there any way you can take us? I think not. That is mate. Checkmate. And very nice mate at that. And also, it is also a fork. If you guys didn't know what a fork is pretty common with a knight to give forks is basically when we attack 2 or more pieces at the same time. So here we're attacking the king and the queen, which is why it's a fork, right? We attack 2 pieces at once. So if the king could have moved, if let's say this rook wasn't here and it moved to d8, then we could take the queen next, right? So that's why the fork is good. Is if we attack 2 things at once, you probably can only stop one, and then we can take the other thing. So that's why forks are nice. And that's why knights are super tricky. But that's good. And I think we're starting to see what the checkmate is. So remember, checkmate has to be a check, right? Has to attack the king, and it cannot be so we do the laser thing. So can the king move anywhere? And then the other thing is, can it be blocked? So in the knight's case, it can never be blocked, so we don't have to worry about that. The last thing is, can it be taken, right? So knight d6 was a super promising one because if we do this, it seems like the king cannot move anywhere, and knight can never be blocked. But the last thing is, it cannot be taken, right? Be able to be taken. So here it can take us, unfortunately. Yeah, so that's it for today. And of course, we went over as well how the basic checkmates work. So just the pieces by themselves. So that one takes a lot of practice, right? So even if you hear me say it and you understand it, you probably have to practice that a lot to get it down. But I think that is it for today. We went over a lot of stuff again, but that's why we have the recordings as well. But anyhow, I hope everyone had a great time, and I had a great time. And yeah, hope everyone has a great week. See you. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
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 Thank you.